But on to less important news.
Yes. Yes. For those of
Let's go to
you
the
who
world of
can't,
Twitter.
because we do have a bit of a crowd tonight. But for those of you who only came for the Kobe talk, I would still encourage you to stay and listen and and maybe jump into that into that chat. Even if you might not agree what we're about to say, but just keep it open mind. That's all we're asking.
I don't mind the hate comments. Screw it.
Yeah. Again, you're talking to me, dude. I'm the one who's always trying to court the what is it? The hate
Court the hate.
comments. But yeah,
So
Robert, why don't you take it away?
so I have some Twitter thoughts. Things that I see. Pretty, because I'm on it fairly regularly, even if I'm not always posting every day. I kind of scour through it, see what's going on, get caught up on, potential, sports stories, news stories, and the like. And well, the first thing I want to talk about, it's actually something that happened during our break that I had been wanting to get to, and there was, and this is also pretty typical of what I see a lot of the time. And one of the guys that I follow, he's on the Cinemassacre YouTube channel, Mike Matei, and uh, one of the things that he's always pretty he harps on. He streams a lot for the site, but he plays a lot of the older games because that's what he grew up with. That's what he likes. And lately there's been a lot of ports of some of these older games to newer consoles, but they're not dumbing down the games, but they create ways to make these hard games easier. And he put out something where, and I tend to agree that, like, if you're using these rewind features or save states and stuff to kind of help you get through the game, you didn't beat the game. It's and it's like you didn't beat it for real. And in typical Twitter fashion, because it upset people in the gaming community, saying that, like, oh, how dare he, like, tell us, like, we didn't beat the game. It's like, well, we can't all beat it on hard mode. It's like, okay, that's fine. Like, he didn't say that, like, you should feel ashamed of yourself that you that you did it that way. If you want to play the game that way, that's fine. But if you want to be technical about it, you didn't really beat the game the way it was meant to be beat. You kind of cheated in a way. And I, for me, I agree. It's like, and there's games that I've had to use save states in the past to kind of, like, because there's no other way I would have been able to beat it. So I don't feel that, like, I didn't. Yes, I technically I got to the end of the game, but I didn't beat it in the way it was originally intended.
Interesting.
But then another typical Twitter fashion is that, oh, well, now, like, because he said something that was true and it pissed off a lot of other people, so instead of actually having a rational discussion or disagreeing, it's like, oh, well, I don't really, you're racist for saying that. It's like, and it, well, and one thing, because the other thing about Mike Matei is he's an artist, so he does, like, a lot of, like, comics and a lot of stuff for the website. And someone posted one of his comics that is pretty funny, actually. And it's like, well, I don't this is I don't care about the opinions of a racist. And it's like, dude, in my mind, it's like, well, so pretty much, like, he's won the argument because you have no argument, so you're going ad hominem. You're trying to attack his credibility instead of actually debating what he says, because you have nothing. You know that he's right. So this is obviously this is kind of the but it wasn't just with like him. I see this with so many other things that are going on in Twitter where it's like, okay, so you don't have an actual, real comment or a real discussion point or a point
or just an
of
art or like a thought out logical argument.
right. And so you're just going to attack the person or write it off. It's like, yeah, that's a real winning attitude there, guys. So that's stuff I see on Twitter all the time, which is who I forget who it said. It's like once you start getting called, racist or whatever for your thoughts, like you've already won the argument because they have nothing.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's just like I forget what I heard this story, but I don't know like who the teams are, but it's like a college football team, and like it's kind of a rivalry, and one team beats the other, and at the end of the game, the two coaches come out to meet, and the coach that won's like, "Oh, good game, coach. You fought hard. You shouldn't. You have nothing to be ashamed of." And the losing coach, kind of having a bad attitude about it. It's like, yeah, well, we got the most first downs, and yeah, and then so the winning coach goes like, all right, next time we'll play for first down, for the most first downs.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that that's what we were. I didn't know that that was how the points work. First downs. It's like that's a point, right? Stupid. Like, you play to win the game. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just to really quickly, because you're talking about how the people they use, I guess like these, you know, that kind of win out of technicality. It's like yes, they beat the game, but because of X, Y, or Z. Um, God, where was I going with this? Oh, just kind of like a historical context. Would you have a problem with Alexander the Great and the Gordian knot?
In the what?
The Gordian knot.
In the Gordian knot?
Yeah. There's this thing, this big. It was like this yoke to this cart, and there was like this huge, gnarled knot. And it was said that whoever was able to unravel it would, be like the master of the world, basically. And so, Alexander the Great looks at this thing. He looks at this huge, like knotted mess, and he takes out a sword and he hacks it, and he hacks it apart, basically. And so by doing that, he technically undid the knot.
See, that to me is like more of a. I think this. Yeah, I think this actually does correlate with this argument, where it's like, okay, yeah, you did it, but you didn't. You were not following the initial intention of what this was meant to do.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, I would say like, yeah, that's that. I would not say he did not undo the knot. He cheated. um, but there's all sorts of like these little like things on Twitter where it's like people say something. It's like they're sharing actually an interesting thought or something that I think it's like, oh, that's actually an interesting let me think about that for a second. But instead of actually we're so many people are intellectually deficient or aren't willing to like actually think through things, and so they just, oh well, that's such a racist comment, or some other just stupid bullshit that it's like, my God.
We got a message from the Peanut Gallery from David Blake. Hey brother, just tell them you're racist. I hate everyone equally. Sorry about your luck. I think he was talking about that. I think that might have been in reference to the story about the two football coaches.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I don't know. David, what exactly were you commenting on there? Let us know. there's a little bit of a lag, so we'll have to wait until it respond back to that. But
Um, but anyway, so the next kind of thing that I constantly see on Twitter, which is this is a little bit more annoying than the previous story, is you get these people who are constantly saying like how who supposedly their parents. I don't even know if that's true, but I'll take that. I'll say that yes, they are parents,
okay.
but they're always saying like how their kids are saying all these like woke sentiments, and like one in particular that kind of drew my ire was uh it was someone who's a gamer, and she's saying like my daughter's like who is like my daughter, mommy, you know why I like PS4, newer games more than old PS1 games? Why is that? Because there's more girls to play with. And it's like, and she's kind of doing the the hand clap or whatever. It's like, wow, my daughter's like, this conversation never fucking took place at all. I guarantee it that this conversation never happened. And I see this shit constantly on Twitter every fucking day. And it's like, none of these conversations happened. You know how I know? Because no kid in the fucking known universe gives a shit. They like the newer games because a lot of times they make stuff that it's a little bit more, the graphics are nice, it's more
Right, it's a little bit more
colorful.
refined. It's a far departure from the first generation the PlayStation games with like square boobed Laura Croft. So like
Yeah,
the
right.
graphics, the graphics have been refined, and so it's a lot nicer to look at. So of course they prefer the newer games to the older ones.
Yeah.
But it's just because that's what they know, or that that's the era of gaming in which they were brought up in. It's just like us when we grew up with the first generation NES, or even further back Atari. It's like we think very fondly of those games because we grew up with them. We and those were our first exposures to video games.
Right. And and so like I understand like why like younger kids like newer games. It makes sense. But this conversation never took place. I get
Or
it's
just to add on to your observation of like these kind of like woke kids, kind of teaching us adults what's what, where having the wisdom of the ages at basically 8. Um, the idea that that kids are supposed to teach us adults is just a laughable concept. Yeah.
fuck no.
I mean, when I was like 4 or 7, it's just like I don't know why people marvel at when kids just kind of utter obvious truths. It's not even that it's so that these kids are so profound. It's just they're obvious truths.
Listen, I'm not saying that like these kids are stupid
No,
or
I'm saying
whatever,
it.
but not in the like sense like like they're. I'm not saying that they're unintelligent or not capable of you know thinking, but like the young kids do not have minds to think about complicated social
Complex,
issues like that.
abstract kind of ideas like that. Yeah,
Well,
their minds aren't capable.
we talked about this, in in your favorite time of us discussing 13 Reasons Why, and one of my
Oh,
main
okay.
points talking about, I'll say one of my main points in talking about that is like kids think in a very black and white world. Even I would say even in the the high school age, it's a
Okay, so
very black and
adolescence.
white.
Adolescence.
Right. There's not a lot of abstract thought. And that's not because they're stupid, it's just that's how the mind works. It takes a lot of age and wisdom and just kind of observing and having experience to realize that there's a lot things are a lot more you know the truth is not very it's not shallow. A lot of times it's very murky, and you have to swim through a
100%.
lot
Or it's
of
just very, it's very, it has great depth.
right. Yeah, it's like
Truth has
all
great depth. It's
yeah.
the ask. There's certain there are certain levels to truth. So but um, I think like the greatest truths have like the most depth.
Right. All shallows are clear.
Yeah, exactly. Real
um,
quick. Yeah, the Blake. These kids nowadays need a good boot to the ass moment.
that's true.
That's true. You're not wrong, dude. You're not wrong.
But yeah, so that's something I see a lot on Twitter. And it's not even like the left, but it's even like you get occasionally get like the random like supposed conservative, like where their kids are saying something that's like conservative, like that conversation didn't happen either.
Right?
It's
Yeah.
like
It's like damn. It's like those damn liberals are destroying this country. It's like your kid did not say that.
yeah. And the fact that you would exploit your kid to make
Yeah,
this
and then
point, like
even if they did say it, they're probably just mimicking what you said. Especially if
yeah,
they're a very young child and they're just like kind of parroting.
this will make mommy or daddy happy, so I'll
Exactly. Yeah,
say it.
it's like when a kid repeats a swear word, they don't know what the word means. It's just they know that it gets a reaction out of the out of the adult. So that's why they keep saying
Yeah.
it. You know,
Pretty much.
pretty much. So it's so it's not as though so it's not as though children, you know, uh, it's not as though children carry this depth within their souls, and they have the wisdom of the ages. It's just sometimes I'll admit sometimes kids say some pretty profound stuff, even though that you don't think that they would be even thinking about it. But the kind of conversations like like the one you mentioned about like, oh, I love because I love the newer games because there's more female characters I can play with. It's like that's not a real conversation, and that's kind of what the problem is for a lot of writing today, especially like within television. Is like they don't know how to write. They don't know how to
No,
write
God, no.
real conversations. It's just like I watched, well, because I like Star Trek, and I saw the first episode for the new Star Trek Picard show.
How is that?
Not as terrible as I was imagining, but not as good as I wanted to be. Um, it's just like they don't understand Star Trek. So like the dialogue is very stilted, and interestingly enough, the young people sound like, even though it's supposed to be like 300-400 years in the future, the people sound like people that talk. The way they speak is the way they speak now.
That's not Star Trek.
Yeah, exactly. Especially like the young people, like one of the lead characters, she says dude, and kind of she kind of talks like a young person today.
That doesn't make any sense. That defeats the whole purpose of Star Trek, because it's the language is it's better than what you and I would say. It's
Exactly.
supposed to be, there's no more of like, because Roddenberry was trying to create outside of like a lot of other science fiction, which is more of a like dystopia and all the types of things. He wanted to create a positive view of what science fiction could be, like what the future could be, and so
Right.
his
It's a
his
yeah.
vision
His was
was
a
a
humanistic.
positive vision.
Yeah, his was like a humanistic or humanism like utopia.
Right,
Where
and
it's like
that's what.
no, like no more are we bogged by religion or like other like ideologies. It's all about the betterment and advancement of of
Mankind.
humankind that eventually lifts us out of the darkness, and we're able to live in peace with each other, and we're free from want and need. And
Yeah.
as ridiculous as that sounds to me personally, it's not a bad dream to aspire to.
Yeah, I don't think so either, and that's what I love about Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that's different,
Mm-hmm.
and to inject kind of crude 21st century language into it. It's just like it's not Star Trek. Sorry.
Right. Yeah, and it's just the what is it? Uh, it's the injection of uh, what is it? Contemporary political issues. And you could say that Star Trek has always been an allegory or about our time you know or a mirror for society because back in TOS it was all about the Cold War between the West and Russia and then like even in like the movies like Undiscovered Country, which is one of my favorite Star Trek movies, is about
So
the
good.
the collapse of the Soviet Union. But it wasn't, and it was what is it? And then it was like Kirk's kind of reconciliation or kind of adjusting to his the anachronism that is him because he
Right.
was Kirk the warrior, he was Kirk the fighter of Klingons, but now like they're the Federation and Klingons are coming are trying to cobble together some kind of a peace agreement, and so it's his kind of making peace with all of that stuff, and that but it still worked, but because it wasn't like saying it wasn't it didn't take a stance on it. It didn't say that
One side was better than the
right. It
other,
wasn't
but it was
good
just
that it wasn't good that the Klingon Empire was falling um, or that warmongering on the Federation side was a good thing. It just kind of presented the case and it let the audience decide for themselves.
right, and that's the great part about it. But
Yeah,
yeah,
but
but going back to Twitter, that conversation never took place.